So, my name is Amy Soddy. I work for FIA. FIA is the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. So, we award state grants and special programs to students that are eligible. So, I am one of the access partners for FIA and I represent all of Allegheny County. So, any questions, comments, concerns that you have, you can reach out to me. I can definitely help as you need. So, my phone number is on the screen, my email is on the screen. So if you have questions, please feel free, save my contact information, reach out to me as needed. I will share that information with all of you at the end as well. But to begin, we're going to talk about financial aid, right? And so what is financial aid? Well, financial aid consists of funds provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. Now you'll notice that the word help is italicized, and there is a reason for that. Rarely does financial aid ever cover the full cost to attend higher education. So it's awesome that you're all participating today because you have to start thinking about a plan of how you're going to cover those costs, right? What's the action plan? What are you going to do? And we're going to be talking about that today. Now, when it comes to financial aid, there are three main types. The first type is gift aid. So that's our grants, our scholarships. So our free money, right? Money that doesn't have to be paid back. Then we have self-help type of financial aid. So that's our work study programs, our savings accounts, our 529s. And I like to call that our earned money because you're earning those funds as you go, whether you earn them through work study, or maybe you've already earned those funds and put them aside for higher education costs. And then lastly is loans. So loans are borrowed money. So if you see anything with the word loan, you know that that's money that you're going to have to pay back in the future. So you're borrowing those loans now and you're going to pay them back in the future. So where does all of this money come from, right? Well, there are three main funding sources when it comes to financial aid. The first type is the federal government. The federal government is the largest source of financial aid, and they provide things like the federal Pell Grant. They have federal work study, federal student loans. They also offer a federal Parent Plus loan and more. Then you have the state grant. So at FIA, where I work, we award state grants and special programs to students. So we have grants, we have our own state work study program, we have also new last year, a private alternative loan called PA Forward, and then the school or college that you're applying for. The school or college may have their own institutional scholarship, they may have their own grants, and some even have their own loans that they can offer. Now, lastly, I do have scholarships up on here. Scholarships can come from so many different sources, so it's hard just to name where the scholarships will be coming from, but different businesses, organizations, clubs, companies, you name it, they're probably offering a scholarship. Now, I've been through the financial aid process as a student, and I've helped countless families and students through the process. And I know that it can be difficult. I'm not here to sugarcoat. I'm not here telling you it's going to be the easiest thing in the world. But what I am going to do is make it as simple as possible. And so to do that, I'm going to simplify it into 5 easy steps. So step 1, look for free money first, right? We want to make sure that you're exhausting all of that free money before you look elsewhere. Step 2, know your specific deadlines. When it comes to free money, everything has a deadline. There are going to be so many different deadlines that you have to meet. And sometimes it can be hard to keep track of all of the deadlines and what's required when you submit the application. So it's really important to keep track of that and make sure you're submitting everything on time. Step 3, fill out the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. So it is 100% completely free to complete. There is no cost at all to complete the FAFSA. That is basically your first step when it comes to applying for financial aid. So the second half of this presentation, starting at 7, is going to be all about the FAFSA. We're going to walk through it screen by screen so you understand what you need to do in order to complete the FAFSA application. Step 4, compare schools' financial aid offers carefully. So after you submit the FAFSA, you're going to start getting notifications from schools. And they're going to have different types of information. They may explain things a little bit differently. Some may list the costs, others may not. So we're going to talk about how important it is, to make sure that you're comparing carefully and that you're understanding what these notifications are telling you and how much you're going to have to pay out of pocket if you attend that school. Step 5, the last step, Be sure you have the money you need. Right after you get those notifications, after you select the school, how are you going to pay the difference? What are the steps that you're going to take? Do you have a plan ready to go? And yes, it's important to make sure you get in the door, right? We want to make sure that you can afford it that first year, but it's so much more than that. We want to make sure that you can afford it that second, that third, that fourth year, maybe even a fifth year, whatever it takes until graduation. So I worked in a financial aid office previously. I can't tell you how many times students were so excited. They came into the financial aid office, they had a plan for that first year, they knew what they were going to do, and then all of a sudden, boom, the second year's here so quick, and they stretched their budgets and they did all the things that they could to make it work for that first year without thinking ahead about the next couple of years, and so they couldn't afford it. So we don't want that to happen to anyone. When you're making the choice, when you're picking a college, it's really important that you have a plan of how you're going to afford it until graduation, whatever that looks like. We're going to go into all of the steps today. So step one, look for free money first. When it comes to scholarships, I'm going to tell you, it's never too early to start looking for a scholarship. So even if maybe the application isn't due until February, at least if you find the scholarship now, you know when it's due, what's required to submit with that application, how much it's for, and any other pieces of information that you need. I think the hardest part when it comes to scholarships is actually searching for the scholarships, right? The applications, that's one thing, but finding scholarships out there is annoying. I understand, I went through it myself. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to share with you a bunch of free scholarship search sites. So they're not affiliated with us at FIA, but I've heard of them over the years, and I haven't really heard anything bad about them. So I'm going to share that at the end with you, so you can keep track of those scholarship search sites. It can be a good place just to start. Now, when it comes to these scholarship search sites, you want to make sure when you're looking for scholarships that you never pay to apply, right? I don't want any of you to pay to apply for a scholarship. Scholarships should be 100% free to complete. So if they're asking you for money, skip that application, go find a different scholarship to apply for. Now, also, I'm going to tell you, don't ignore the scholarships with smaller amounts. I can't tell you how many times I've had students say, oh, well, that scholarship was only $200. It's not worth my time. I'm not applying. Well, guess what? That scholarship, because it's only $200, probably has less people applying. So you have a better chance of getting that scholarship. And also, $200 is still $200 that you can save, $200 less that you have to borrow, and those scholarships can stack up over time. So it's definitely worth your time to even apply for those scholarships of smaller amounts. Now, one thing too, if you don't get a scholarship your first year, or maybe you only get one or two, don't give up the search process, right? There are scholarships specifically out there for sophomores, or for juniors, or for seniors. So as you're looking for scholarships this year, if you notice one, maybe you want to be an engineer major, and you notice a scholarship for engineers, but you have to be a junior to apply. Well, write down that information, keep track of those. Go back to them in 2 years, but you've already done the work, you've already found them, you know what they are, you know what you have to submit. Maybe you have to have a certain GPA or a certain number of credits. When I was a student, I made an Excel sheet and I kept track of all of the scholarships that I found that I would apply for. This can be really helpful over time. That way you're not doing the process twice, right? As you search now, put those ones aside that might be something you could apply for in the future and go back to them. Most of the time, they have the same deadline every year. It's the same amount, it's the same process, the same application, etc. So don't make yourself do the whole process twice. Look every time and keep track of them. Now, like I said, everything when it comes to free money has a deadline. Okay, so when you're applying for admissions, maybe for a specific major, there's going to be deadlines that you have to meet, that you have to make sure that you submit the application by. Now, when it comes to scholarships, again, institutions have their own deadlines. Outside scholarships have their own deadlines. You want to keep track of these. Now, if you're like me and you procrastinate, right, and you wait till the last minute, we've all been there. If you wait until the night before a scholarship application is due to actually begin the application, you may start the process and find out that, oh, you need a copy of your transcript, or you need 2 letters of recommendation to submit with this application. Well, if you waited till the night before, now you're out of time, right? You don't have time to get all of that stuff ready and submitted by the next day. And so you're scrambling, you're stressed out, and you potentially just missed out on an opportunity for free money. So my biggest piece of advice is when you're looking at scholarship applications, go through the whole thing, read through the whole application, and make sure you understand, do they need any additional materials from you? And if so, get that stuff ready ahead of time. All right. Also, like I said, the FAFSA, the free application for financial aid. Some schools have a priority deadline for when you need to complete the FAFSA by. So it's really important to check the college websites that you're interested in applying to. Double check, make sure, do they have a priority deadline? What are the different deadlines for their own institutional scholarships and for my admissions process? Again, keep track of those deadlines. Now the FAFSA does open up as early as October 1st. So last month it opened up. So it's available. You can go out there at any time and start that FAFSA process. Now I want to point out two really important deadlines. So like I said, at FIA, we award Pennsylvania state grants to eligible students. In order to be considered for those scholarships, or excuse me, for those grants, you have to complete your FAFSA no later than May 1st. So May 1st of 2021, you need to have your FAFSA done in order to be considered for a state grant for the fall 21, spring 22 year. Now, there is one exception to that. Okay, so if you're planning to enroll in a college that has open enrollment, so maybe it's a community college, a business, trade, technical school, a hospital school of nursing, etc., then you actually have until August 1st of 2021 to complete your FAFSA. Now, I'm going to tell all of you right now, I don't want any of you waiting until May. I definitely don't want you waiting until August. Even if you think, I'm just going to go to a community college, I have time, still get it done. You may change your mind and you may miss out on institutional aid because you waited that long. So if I could suggest, I would suggest that you make sure you complete your FAFSA by the end of this year if you can. So by the end of December, have it done, and then you don't even have.
I got it. Bye.
Okay. So again, May 1st is the deadline every year. So every single year you have to do the FAFSA, and every year you have to make sure you submit your FAFSA no later than May 1st. So keep track of that deadline, put it in a planner, write it down somewhere where you're going to remember. But again, make sure that you understand that your FAFSA is done every year by May 1st. I honestly suggest Thanksgiving break as a perfect time to do your FAFSA every year while you're home on break, get it done with, and then you don't even have to worry about it for the rest of the year. Okay, so like I said, the FAFSA, that's your connection to funding. Okay, so that is the main step. I can't tell you how many times I have parents and students say, oh, well, you know, I don't think I'm going to be eligible for any aid, so I'm not going to fill out the FAFSA. Listen, even if you don't think you're going to be eligible, again, you still want to complete the FAFSA. Your institution, again, might use your FAFSA information when they award scholarships. We at FIA, you use your FAFSA information to look at your eligibility for the Pennsylvania State Grant. FAFSA also, just by completing the FAFSA, you're applying for the federal Pell Grant, you're applying for federal student loans, you're applying for federal work study. So it is vital that you still complete the FAFSA. Also, like I said, you know, people who say, it's not worth it, I'm not going to complete it. You know, I wasn't eligible my first year, so I'm not doing it. Listen, at my prior institution where I used to work, we would award scholarships to returning students. And in order to be considered, you had to meet all of the requirements. One of the requirements was that you completed a FAFSA. So even something that small, it didn't really have anything to do with it. We didn't need to make sure, you know, that you had any specific financial aid. It was just that you had to complete a FAFSA. So even if you weren't eligible for aid, that was still one of the requirements. And I see that a lot for outside scholarships too. You know, as you're filling out the application, it asks you, did you complete a FAFSA, yes or no? If you put no, they may not even consider you for that scholarship because they think that you're not trying to apply for all of the different types of aid that you can. So even if you're not going to be eligible for grants, one, you will still be eligible for federal student loans, and two, it really can help you when you're in your process for searching for outside scholarships and institutional aid. Now you can go to FAFSA.gov to complete the FAFSA application. Like I said, you have to file the FAFSA every single year. You can start as early as October 1st. So you can start every year on October 1st and you can file the FAFSA for the following year. Now, after this presentation, like I said, I'm going to do a walkthrough of the FAFSA. So if you want to stay on, you can listen, and I'm going to walk through step by step how you complete the FAFSA, the information that you need, how to create an account, all of that good stuff. Now, after you complete the FAFSA, though, there may be other schools that you need to submit. So some schools have specific forms that you have to submit in order to be considered for institutional financial aid. One of those forms is called the College Scholarship Service Profile. That's the CSS profile. Now, about 400 colleges and institutions across the US require this profile. If they require it, all of the colleges have their own individual profile. So say you're interested in applying for, let's say, 5 schools, okay? If 3 of them require you to complete a CSS profile, you're going to have to complete 3 separate profiles. And that's because some schools ask different individual questions than others. Now, again, like I said, this is how they award institutional scholarships. So you only complete the CSS profile if one of the colleges that you're interested in requires it. There is a cost to complete it. The list of all of the colleges, the 400 that require it, is located at collegeboard.org. So you can go right onto collegeboard.org and verify if you actually need to submit if you need to submit the CSS profile or not. If your school is not listed, you do not complete the CSS profile. This is a step that you get to skip. If it does require the CSS profile, then that means you have to complete the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So the CSS profile does not replace the FAFSA. It's done in addition to the FAFSA. And it's going to ask you a lot more questions, right? It's basically even more in-depth about your finances and your assets and all of that stuff. So it's going to take a little bit more time to complete that in addition to the FAFSA. But again, if your school requires it, it's worth completing because, again, you could be eligible for institutional scholarships that way. Now, again, after filing the FAFSA as well, your information is going to be shared with us at FIA and with all of the colleges that you listed on the FAFSA. So all of those colleges are going to get that information that you've listed. Then in a few days, you're going to get an email that includes your student aid report. Your student aid report is basically just an overview of everything you've submitted on the FAFSA. So you're going to want to double check, right? Make sure that everything looks correct. Make sure that you filed it right. As long as everything looks good on that student aid report, you can file it away. And then it's basically a waiting game. Okay, so at that point, after your colleges start to get your FAFSA information, you're going to have to wait until they start sending you financial aid notifications. And we're going to be talking about those notifications in just a little bit. But I want to point out, FAFSA uses prior tax year information. So what does that mean? So you are going to be completing the 21-22 FAFSA because you're interested in attending college during fall of 2021, spring of 2022. So you're completing the 21-22 FAFSA. Because it's using prior tax year information, that means when you fill out the FAFSA, it's actually asking for your information from 2019. So that's tax information that you probably or your parents have already filed and they've already completed their 2019 taxes, which makes it easy. Again, that's why you can file the FAFSA right now. But because it's based on 2019 tax information and it's almost the end of 2020, a lot of things might have changed since then. So if there's been a significant decrease in income, that could be something where you would file a special circumstance appeal. So what does that mean? So if you have to file a special circumstance appeal because there was a change in income, let's say, then you would have to reach out to all of the schools that you're interested in, email or give them a call. You would talk to them about the situation. Let them know what the situation is, why there was a decrease in income, what that decrease looks like. They may have you submit additional information. So they may ask for, they may say, hey, we're going to wait to do this until the end of the year once you have your W-2s from the end of the year. Some schools may have you wait until you file 2020 taxes since it's still early. So they might say, you know what, we're not completing special circumstance appeals until you file 2020 taxes. And then what it would allow them to do is once they gather all of that information from you and they have everything they need, they can actually go onto your FAFSA and they can enter the information as it is now. to show that there was a big change and that this is what your situation looks like now. They're the only ones who can do that. So you, the student, you, the parent, you can't use 2020 tax information, right? But the school could if there was a decrease in income and if you file a special circumstance appeal. Like I said, schools handle this totally differently. So some schools may start the process next month in December for you. Other schools may wait until next summer. So you have to reach out to every school individually. And just know, if one school makes a change, that change is only good for that one school. So their change at one school doesn't impact all the others. That's why you have to reach out to all of the schools if there's been a change. Now, say you file the FAFSA maybe this weekend. Okay, maybe your parents are married, you list both of them on the FAFSA, and then in July, your parents get divorced or they get separated. Again, that's a special circumstance. So again, you could reach out to the financial aid office, let them know what happened, let them know what the change was, and then they're going to let you know what you have to submit to them. So again, just be sure, talk to your financial aid offices, right? At the colleges that you're interested in. Don't be afraid of them. They're there to help you, right? They're there to help make sure that you have all of the answers that you need. So whether you're reaching out to me or reaching out to them, make sure you're reaching out to somebody if you're not sure what you need to do, right? If there's been a change and you don't know how to proceed, reach out to one of us. We can definitely help. Now, after you file the FAFSA, you're going to be answering questions about all different types of things, about how many people are in your household, what your parents' income is, what yours as the students, what your income looks like. They're going to take, it's over 30 different things. So 30 different questions that you answer, and they're going to calculate that all into one number. That number is your EFC. So that is your expected family contribution. So in FAFSA's eyes, that is the amount that you, the student and parent, should be able to contribute to the cost of higher education. Now, before you panic, that does not mean that's how much you're going to have to contribute. That doesn't mean that's how much you're going to owe every year. It honestly has nothing to do with that, okay? So I have parents who call me up and they're literally today, a mom was like, oh my goodness, we filed the FAFSA. It says our EFC is $30,000. I cannot afford $30,000 every year. Like, what are we going to do? Like, she's in a panic. And I'm like, again, don't worry. That's not how much you're going to owe by any means, okay? The EFC helps with two things. The first is the EFC tells the college and institution if you're eligible for a federal Pell Grant. And then second, your EFC is used to determine if you have any financial need. So how do they calculate financial need? Okay, well, one, your EFC is the same no matter where you go to college. So whether you go to college at a private school, a public school, a community college down the street, your EFC is going to be the same. However, when they calculate your financial need, they take their individual cost of attendance. Now that word is going to be thrown around a lot, cost of attendance. It's called the COA. So what is the cost of attendance? All right, well, real quick, the cost of attendance is the average cost to attend for the whole year. Now that includes direct and indirect costs. So that would be things like tuition and fees, room and board, but it also includes things that are indirect costs. So maybe you don't pay the institution, but you have to pay for these types of things, like books, right? You might not pay for those through the institution. You may be getting them from a third party, right? So books, supplies, transportation like gas, right, or a parking pass, miscellaneous expenses, etc. So the cost of attendance is actually a lot higher than what you're going to be billed for. So they take that cost of attendance, they subtract out your EFC from the FAFSA, and the difference gives them your financial need. Now, financial need helps them to understand if you're eligible for need-based type of financial aid. Okay, so what kind of need-based financial aid is that? Well, first, like I said, your EFC is used to determine if you're eligible for a federal Pell Grant. Now, this current year, this college year right now that's happening, that's the 2021 year, for those that are in college right now, the maximum Pell Grant that they can receive for the whole year is $6,345. So about $6,300 is the maximum they can receive for the whole year. Again, those Pell Grant amounts are the same no matter where you go. So again, private school, public school, community college, the maximum Pell Grant is the exact same. Now, in order to qualify for that 6345, you have to have a 0 EFC. So you would have to have the lowest EFC that there is. Now, if your EFC goes up to the max EFC is $5,711, so $5,711 is the max EFC that you can have and still qualify for the federal Pell Grant. So if you did have an EFC around 5,700, your maximum Pell Grant would probably be around 600 for the whole year. So an EFC of 0 to 5,700, anything in between, you're going to be eligible for a federal Pell Grant. It's on a sliding scale. So schools are going to see what your EFC is, use the scale to figure out exactly what your Pell Grant is. Okay? If your EFC is above that 5,700, you won't qualify for a federal Pell Grant, but you may still qualify for a Pennsylvania State Grant. So we don't use the same EFC as the federal Pell Grant. In fact, more students are eligible for the Pennsylvania State Grant here in PA than they are for the federal Pell Grant. So more students receive that Pennsylvania State Grant. Okay, then like I said, they take that financial need calculation. So cost minus your EFC, that difference. If there's a difference, that can help schools understand if the student is going to be eligible for federal work study and if you're going to be eligible for a federal subsidized loan. We're going to talk about what those things are. Again, most of the time you do have to be at least half-time in order to qualify. On average, half-time is about 6 credits each semester. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Pennsylvania State Grant now. I get this question a lot, but what if folks are considering going to school out of state? Okay, if you're going to school in one of the following states, you may still be considered and be eligible for a Pennsylvania State Grant. So those states are Delaware, DC, Massachusetts, Ohio, Vermont, and West Virginia. So if you're considering going to school in any of those states, you may still qualify for the PA State Grant. So it's very important that you still can complete the FAFSA every year by May 1st. Now I want to point out, and it's on the screen, you'll notice the reciprocal state grant, the maximum award that you can receive is $578 for the year. Again, that's for this current year. So $578 for the entire year if you receive a reciprocal grant. You'll notice down below it shows the maximum award amounts for different cost tiers for colleges. It's a lot higher than that $578. Again, that's because you will receive a higher grant if you stayed here in Pennsylvania, if you qualify. So looking down below, we do things a little bit differently than the federal grants, okay? Because at FIA, we understand that the higher the cost of the colleges, you need more financial aid, right? So if your cost is between, say, 0 and 12,000, the maximum PA State Grant that you could receive is about $2,400 for the whole year. You'll notice then if you go up to the next cost tier, $12,001 to $19,000, the maximum award goes up to $3,800. And then $19,001 to $29,000, it goes up to $4,100-ish. And then from $2,901 to $32,000 and plus, the maximum award goes up to $4,500. So that'd be for the entire year. Now the minimum award is the same no matter where you go, no matter the cost. If you're eligible, the minimum award you would receive is $500. And again, it could be anything in between. So it could be anywhere from that $500 minimum award amount up to the maximum award amount, depending on what you're eligible for. Okay. Now, I do want to talk about, we do have other state programs. So maybe you don't qualify for the Pennsylvania State Grant. There may be other grants that you do qualify for. So for example, we have our own state work study program. Now, work study, what that is, so I'm going to just talk about work study quick because there's a lot of misinformation about work study out there, and I get a lot of questions about work study. So the main federal work study program, again, that's need-based. So you would have to have financial needs. So when the school takes the cost minus your EFC, you would have to have a leftover amount to show that you have financial need to qualify. But if you qualify for federal work study, what that means is you could apply for a work study job on campus. If you apply, you would have to submit an application, a resume. If you get selected, then you might have to do an interview. Okay, but if you do an interview, you get selected, and you start your work study position. Now, typically these start in the fall, right when classes start. You would start working, and maybe every 2 weeks or every week, you'll get a paycheck for the hours that you worked that week. Now that paycheck is going to go to you as the student, directly to you, and you can do whatever you want with that. You can put it towards pizza, you can go buy some coffee, you can save it for next semester. It's up to you. It's your money. You earned it. Okay, so when you start to get financial aid notifications, some of them are going to say, hey, look at all the financial aid you're getting, and they're going to include work study. Maybe they're going to say, you can earn up to $3,000. That's the maximum you could earn. It's not a guarantee that you're going to be eligible or that you're going to receive a federal work study position. Because like I said, you have to apply. And at my prior institution, we had so many more students who were eligible for federal work study than we actually did work study positions. So a lot of students who were eligible didn't actually get a federal work study position because we didn't have enough positions. So it was really competitive. Okay, so it's not a guarantee that you're going to have federal work study, but that just means you're eligible to apply. Okay, the amount that they're going to list on the notification is the maximum you could earn if you worked the max hours every week of the semester. Okay, now again, that money is not going to be applied to your bill. So if they list $3,000 on your notification, that's not $3,000 less that you have to pay. That's just $3,000 extra you could earn and do whatever you want with it. Okay, so a lot of times people include that in the calculation when they figure out how much they're going to owe. And then when they get to the college, they realize how federal work study works, and now they're scrambling to figure out how they're going to pay that amount. Okay, so if you see federal work study on your notification, it means you're eligible to apply for a position. Sometimes those open up in the summer, before you start attending college. But again, they're very competitive, so it's not a guarantee that you're going to get a position. So back to FIA, like I said, we have our own state work study program. It's similar to the federal work study program. The difference is that it's not going to be on your campus. It may be, it may not, but we work with community organizations as well to offer programs for students to apply. So there's different positions out there. And if you go to FIA.org, you can take a look to see. You do have to be eligible for the Pennsylvania State Grant to apply for state work study. And then again, you would complete an application process. It's not a guarantee, but if you get selected for the position, you'll just get a paycheck for all the hours that you work. And it's up to you, again, to do whatever you want with that money. Now, we also have a blind or deaf beneficiary grant. We have an educational assistance grant for our National Guard members. We have a foster ed tuition waiver for our foster students. We have partnerships for access to higher education. It's a scholarship program that we do. We also have a Ready to Succeed scholarship and more. So if you are curious about any of these programs, you can go right to FIA.org. You can read into any of the programs we have. Almost all of them have an application process. So you'd have to apply at FIA.org for some of these different programs. The one I'm going to point out is the Ready to Succeed scholarship. It's the last one listed. That does not have its own application process. The way that Ready to Succeed works is it's usually for students who do not qualify for the Pennsylvania State Grant. So the EFC family income is too high to qualify. However, if the student has at least a 3.25 cumulative GPA, they're at least a sophomore with their number of credits, then the school could go in, usually it's in the fall term, the school could go in, they can nominate students, the nominations would be sent to us at FIA, we'd select students to receive an award, and you would receive a $2,000 scholarship if selected. Now, some students, you can receive that multiple years in a row. So I have seen students who did receive it 2 years in a row. Again, it's $2,000 for the whole year. And usually it's for students who don't qualify for the PA State Grant. So it's just, again, another reason why it's important to make sure you complete your FAFSA and make sure you complete it early every single year. Now, like I said earlier, all students, no matter what your parents make, no matter what you as the student make or how much you have saved, all students, as long as you're a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, are going to be eligible for a federal student loan. So again, regardless of your financial need, you're going to be eligible for a federal student loan. Now, these student loans are in the student's name, so it's not linked to a parent, not linked to anybody else. There's no credit check that you have to go through. You're automatically going to be offered this loan. Now the loan is in the student's name, it's through the federal government, it has a fixed interest rate for the life of the loan. So for this current year, what's happening right now for our college students, the interest rate is 2.75%. That's pretty low. That's actually the lowest that rate has been in a very long time. But so the interest rate is a fixed rate of 2.75%. Now, every year on July 1st, the interest rate on those student loans changes. So next July, there will be a new interest rate, and that will be the interest rate of the loan that you receive your first year. Now, schools are going to offer you this loan. So they're going to say, hey, you're eligible for this federal student loan, but it's up to you as a student to decide, do you want to accept the loan? Do you want to reduce it? Do you want to deny it? It's up to you. So you get to make that decision as the student, what you want to do with that federal student loan. There's two federal student loans that I'm going to be talking about. Neither of them require any payments while you're in school and during a 6-month grace period. So after you graduate, you have 6 months before your loans kick into repayment. So no payments are required during the time you're in school, enrolled at least half time, which is 6 credits, and during the six months after you graduate. There are flexible repayment plans after you graduate as well that you can look into. So I do suggest utilizing the federal student loans before you look elsewhere when it comes to financial aid in terms of the Parent Plus loans or private alternative loans, which we're going to talk about in a bit. Now, like I said, there's two types of federal student loans. So the first type is a federal subsidized loan. So I call that the sub loan. The second type is a federal unsubsidized loan or an unsub loan. Now the subsidized loan, the sub loan, is based on financial need. So again, by that calculation, cost of attendance minus EFC, if there's a difference, you may be eligible for a federal subsidized loan. If you're eligible and you accept this loan, no interest is charged while you're enrolled or during that 6-month grace period. So in fact, the government is paying the interest as it accrues for you. So if you accept that loan your first year, when you graduate, it will still be the same amount. It won't have gotten any larger. The unsubsidized loan, the unsub, the interest does accrue while you're in school and during your grace period. So any interest that has not been paid while you're in school and during the grace period will be capitalized at the start of repayment. So if you borrow the unsub loan, that loan will slightly get bigger, every year until you graduate. Now the payments are not required, so you don't have to make any payments on that loan. But if you want to, if you have the means to do so, you could make a payment of any amount at any time just to help pay down some of that interest. Now I want to point out with both the subsidized and unsubsidized loan, there is about a 1% origination fee that comes right off the top. So the government takes about 1% right off the top and they use that for processing and originating the loan. Now it's only 1%, so honestly, most people don't even notice that it happens. But I do want to point that out because when your loan actually disperses, you might notice that it's not the exact same amount that the school offered you. Now, when it comes to these loans, there are maximum amounts that you can borrow, and it's dependent on the number of credits that you have. So for a first-year student, the maximum you can borrow is $5,500 for the whole year. Now, again, that doesn't matter where you go to school. That is an amount across the board, across the U.S. That is a federal maximum amount. So a lot of times I have parents who would call me when I worked in financial aid, and they'd say, well, we owed, $10,000 for the year, so we're just going to, borrow that in a student loan. Can you just increase the loan? No, we can't. That $5,500 is the maximum you can borrow as a student in a federal student loan. Now, there are other loan options that we're going to talk about in a bit, but I just want to point that out. Again, if you go to school out of state, if you go to a private school or public school or a community college, that amount is the same. And again, a lot of people don't realize that. Okay. Now, of that $5,500, the maximum sub loan that you can borrow is $3,500. So again, that sub loan is based on financial need. So if you have enough financial need for the full $3,500 in a sub loan, then you will be offered the difference of $2,000 in an unsub loan. So it would total $5,500. You would have two loans, a $3,500 sub loan, a $2,000 unsub loan, and it's up to you if you want to accept, reduce, or decline both of those loans. Now, some students may not qualify for the full $3,500 in a sub loan. So maybe based on that calculation, you qualify for, let's say, $1,000 in a sub loan. Well, then you'd be offered a $1,000 sub loan and a $4,500 unsub loan. Again, totaling $5,500. Or, for example, with that mom who called today, she had an EFC of about $30,000. Maybe the cost of the school, the cost of attendance for the year is $28,000. Well, $28,000 minus $30,000 is negative, so you don't have financial need. So in that case, her student will not be eligible for a subsidized loan, but instead would be offered a full $5,500 unsub loan. Now, I had a parent last week during one of my presentations go, well, what's the point of the unsub loan? It's accruing interest. Like, this is ridiculous, Yes, it does accrue interest, but guess what? A 2.75% fixed interest rate with no required payments is pretty unheard of. Even if you apply for private alternative loans, you probably won't be able to find that. And I want to point out with these federal student loans, like I said, there's flexible repayment plans. So when I first graduated from graduate school, I was looking for jobs. I finally found a job. My loans kick into repayment. I didn't have enough money to make the standard repayment every month that was required of me. So I applied for an income-based repayment plan, and my payments were reduced significantly for the first year, right, until I could start making more money and afford it. Now, again, going on an income-based plan, yes, that's going to extend it. So instead of paying your loans off in 10 years, maybe it'll take you 15 or 20, but you have that flexibility. Some of the other options we're going to talk about in a bit, you don't have as much flexibility. I also want to point out that there are loan forgiveness programs out there too. These apply specifically to federal student loans. So again, before you look elsewhere for loans, utilize your federal student loans first. And then if there's a balance money owed, which there probably will be, then you want to start looking elsewhere. Okay, so utilize those first. Now, as a second year, I want to point out the loan amount increases. So as a second year student, it goes up to $6,500 for the year. As a third and fourth year, it goes up to $7,500 each year. So if you borrow the maximum your first, second, third, and fourth year, then you will have a total of $27,000 in a federal student loans. That would be your total. If you have to stay an extra year, so maybe it takes you a fifth year to graduate, the maximum amount that you can borrow in a federal student loan as a dependent student is $31,000. So no matter how long it takes you, that's the max you can borrow. So if you have to stay a fifth year, you only actually have $4,000 left that fifth year. So at the end of this, I'm going to talk about how important it is to make sure you're graduating on time. And that's just one of the many reasons why. Okay, so we're jumping right into step 4. I know I've gone over a lot of information, and after I finish this portion of the presentation, I can answer any questions that you have, but we're going to keep moving because, again, I still have a lot more to cover. All right, so step 4, compare schools' financial aid notices carefully. So, okay, you're going to submit the FAFSA, and then you're going to sit and wait, right? The FAFSA submitted. Now you have to wait until the financial aid offices start reaching out. I'm going to tell you, they're probably going to reach out directly to the student, directly to the email address that you listed on your application. So make sure that when you're applying, that you're including an email address that you're actually checking and keep track of that. I have parents, again, when I worked in financial aid, they'd call me all the time and say, we never got a notification, what's going on? I'm like, yeah, you did. We emailed it to the student at this email address. And the parent's like, oh, well, they don't check their email. Okay, this is a perfect time to start making sure you're checking your email because the schools are going to send you those notices. Now, these happen at all different times. So at my previous institution, we started sending those awards out in December. Some don't wait, or some will wait, until January or February. So you kind of have to wait until you receive all of the notifications, and then you have to start comparing them. There's no specific standard format for these notices. So some are going to include federal loans, some may not. Some may tell you you're eligible for an institutional scholarship, and if so, it may explain what you have to do in order to maintain that scholarship year after year. So you want to make sure you're reading these carefully. Others of them are going to include the next steps. So, hey, this is how you accept your loan. This is the steps you need to do in order for your financial aid to pay. Make sure you're paying attention to those notices and reading them very carefully. Now, one thing I want to talk about is, remember I told you about cost of attendance, COA. That includes, again, direct and indirect costs. Our cost of attendance at my prior institution was about $4,000 higher than the actual billed costs if you lived on campus. So on these financial aid notices, some schools are going to list their costs of attendance minus aid, here's your balance. Others may use their actual billed costs minus your aid, here's your balance. So if you're comparing this and you're using one cost of attendance, one billed cost, that could be a difference of about $4,000, maybe even more. So you want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples, right? If you're using cost of attendance for one school, use cost of the attendance for the other school, so you can get a really good idea of how much is going to actually be owed of you and how much you might have to pay out of pocket for things like books and transportation and miscellaneous expenses. So you're prepared for that cost for that whole year, because again, they add up. Now on here, this is just a couple of quick questions you can ask yourself as you're reviewing the notifications, making sure you understand, is this award the same every single year? Are there things that I have to do to make sure I maintain this financial aid? Maybe a scholarship year after year. Sometimes there's GPA requirements, right? So they may offer you a scholarship and say, hey, we can give you a $6,000 scholarship and you'll get this every year, but you have to have at least a 3.25 or a 3.5 and complete a certain number of credits. Well, start having that conversation. Well, what happens if you don't meet that GPA requirement? Can you earn back that scholarship, or is it gone forever? And what is your backup plan just in case you don't meet that requirement? How are you going to afford that extra $6,000 for the next 3 or 4 years? Right? Again, I've seen that happen. Students get this scholarship, they're super excited, they come, and then they realize college is a lot harder than high school, and they're not prepared, or they didn't put as much time into it as they should have. And now they lose a scholarship, and now they can't afford to stay. So you don't want to be in that situation again, making sure that you have those conversations. Well, what if something changes? What if I don't receive this aid? What's that going to look like? And what are we going to do? Step 5, be sure you have the money you need. Like I said, cost minus your financial aid. What's the difference? And what are you going to do to pay that? Have you made a realistic choice? Are you going to be able to pay back these loans after you graduated? Are you going to be able to afford that? Well, 2 of the ways that we see folks cover that gap, right, the difference that's owed after financial aid is applied. The first is a Federal Direct Plus loan. So this is a parent plus loan. So it's in the parent's name. So parents, you would be the one that would apply for this loan, and it's going to be in your name for the life of the loan. Now, it is a federal loan, so it's in the federal government. So you'll have a loan servicer through the federal government that you would pay. When you complete the application, you get to decide if you want to start making payments right away, or if you want to defer payments until after your student graduates. You can also opt into a 6-month grace period. But just like the unsubsidized loan, the interest is accruing on that loan. So the loan is getting bigger and bigger whether you make payments or not. So again, if you select to defer payments on that loan, I do suggest, if you can, make payments every now and then of any amount, just to help keep that interest down, to make it a little bit more affordable in the long run. Now, when you apply for the Federal Direct Plus loan, this is different than the student loan. It does require a credit check. So it will check your credit as the parent. I'd want to point out, with the Parent Plus loan, it's mostly looking for adverse credit, so bad credit. So it's a little bit easier to get approved for the Federal Direct Plus loan than it is the option that we're going to talk about next. With the Federal Direct Plus loan, it does have a fixed interest rate. For this current year, I want to say it's about 5.3%. Again, it changes every year in July, and that's the lowest that rate has been in a very long time. If a parent applies for the Federal Direct Plus loan and they're denied, so if a parent does apply and gets denied, then the can offer the student an additional unsubsidized loan. So the unsub loan, that's the one that accrues interest while they're in school, of $4,000 for the year. That is the only way that you can receive more in a federal student loan, is by applying for a Federal Plus loan and having a parent denied. Now, the other option is a private alternative loan. Now, these private alternative loans are from private lenders or financial institutions. Typically, it's in the student's name. So the student is the one that's actually applying for the loan, but 99.9% of the time, they need a co-signer or co-borrower on that loan. Again, there is a credit check process, but these loans are specifically looking at credit score, credit history, your debt to income ratio. All of that is going to impact the interest rate that they offer you. So they're going to give you a range, and you might fall somewhere in that range depending on what your credit looks like. Again, most students don't have a lot of credit, so it's mostly based on the co-signer's credit. It's also going to be impacted if you choose a variable rate versus a fixed rate, and the different type of repayment plan that you select is going to impact the interest rate as well. They have a bunch of different ones. You can start paying right away. You can pay just the interest as it accrues every month. Maybe you just make a flat interest rate of $20 just to get used to making payments on it. Or maybe you do select to defer until after graduation. There's different repayment plans. All of the lenders offer things differently. Now, I have people ask me all the time, well, Amy, should I go with the PLUS loan, the alternative loans? What's better? Well, one, the Parent PLUS loan, just like the sub and unsub loan, has origination fees, except these fees are higher. They're about 4.2%. So the government takes about 4% right off the top, and they use that for processing and originating the loan. That's money that you're never going to see, but you have to pay interest on. So that's one of the reasons why people don't always like to go with the Parent PLUS loan. The second reason is, again, it's in the parent's name for the life of the loan. These private alternative loans are usually in the student's name, and some of the lenders will have a cosigner release option, where after you make a certain number of payments after the student graduates, maybe 2 or 3 years, after they made enough payments, they have their credit up, they can apply to have you, the cosigner, removed from the loan. Again, it's one of the reasons why parents sometimes like this option. But on the other side of things, the Parent PLUS loan is easier to be approved for. So if you do apply through a private lender and you're getting denied, you may have a better chance to get approved for the Parent PLUS loan. And two, the interest rate being 5% this year is the lowest it's been. So some folks can't find a better interest rate with the private lenders than with the PLUS loan. So you have to compare it. If you call me, I'm not going to be able to tell you. I can explain the difference between the two, but it's really going to depend on your situation, what you're looking for, and what you can afford. But either way, I want to make sure that you get the best interest rate you can. So definitely search around and read the fine print, especially with the private alternative loans. There's just so many different lenders that offer different things. You want to make sure you're going with the one that's offering you the best. Now, I want to point out quickly, FIA, like I said, we have our own private alternative loan. It's called PA Forward. It's very similar to the other private alternative loans out there. It's just another option. Now, don't go with the easiest one always, right? Sometimes that's not the best. So definitely still compare all of the private alternatives. Find what's going to be best for you. So what can you do now? You can apply for an FSA ID account, which we're going to talk about at the next portion of the presentation. You can visit college websites, start understanding, are there additional forms that you have to submit? Are there specific deadlines that you have to meet? Talk about students. You can't do this without your parent. You really can't. And parents, your students need you through this whole process. So you guys have to communicate. You have to talk. I know it could be uncomfortable, but what can you afford? What's your plan? Are you going to go with the Parent PLUS loan, private alternative loan? Can you afford to pay some out of pocket? If so, how much? You're going to have that conversation. Don't wait until your bill is due and it's August and you're starting classes in 2 weeks to have that conversation, because then it's too late. So it's good that you're all here, like I said, because you want to really start talking about these things now. You can utilize net price calculators to start understanding what the cost might look like before you get those financial aid notifications. And of course, you can explore scholarships. When it comes to net price calculators, basically most colleges have these. You put in and answer a couple of quick questions, and it's going to generalize how much financial aid you may be eligible for. Again, this can just give you a general idea while you're waiting for those financial aid notifications in the mail. I do have to point out return on investment. I'm not going to lie. Higher education costs have increased every single year, and they continue to rise, right? Higher education is an investment. You are making an investment for your future. You're putting all of this money into your education in the hopes that you can pay back these loans one day. So you want to make sure that you can do that, right? Are you making a realistic choice? is the field that you're going into. What's the demand for that employment field? What does it look like now? And what are they projecting it's going to look like in 4 or 5 years? What's your expected salary when you graduate based on what your major is or the field that you're looking into? Do you have any idea of what that looks like? And how are you going to afford when you're living on your own and you're paying rent and bills and your student loans and all that? One tool that can be really helpful just to get you thinking about those things is called My Smart Borrowing. It's interactive. It's completely free for you to use. You can go on, put in the type of major that you're looking into, or put in a couple if you're not sure, and just start looking into what the different fields are for those majors, what the different projected salaries are, the demands for that employment based on where you want to live, whether you want to be in a rural area or a city or a different state. How's that going to impact your future, right? So this can really help you just get in that mindset of you're putting all of this money into your investment. What's it going to look like when you graduate? So ways to reduce the need for financial aid. Like I said, graduate on time. Where your federal student loans are going to run out if you have to stay an extra year. Your Pennsylvania state grant you can only receive for up to 8 full-time semesters. That's 4 years. If you have to stay an extra semester or an extra year, you won't have a state grant to help you with that. That's more money you're going to have to pay out of pocket. Research the right major. Utilize My Smart Borrowing. Again, making sure that you're on the right track. You have ideas of what you want to do in the future. Earn college credits while you're in high school if you can. Consider 2+2 or 3+2 strategies. 2+2 strategies are where you go to a community college or a college transferable program for 2 years, and then you transfer to a 4-year degree program. So if you need a 4-year degree, consider that as an option. You can save tons of money that way. They also have some 3+2 strategies where you get your bachelor's degree and your master's degree within 5 years. Well, if you need a master's degree based on what you want to study, maybe that, again, can be a good option to save money. Students hate when I say this, but consider commuting. Or if you have a car, leaving your car at home, again, that can save so much money. Living on campus costs about $10,000 to $12,000 for a year, depending on where you go. Times that by 4, that's over $40,000 that you're paying to live on campus and for your meal plan. So make sure, again, this is why it's really important to apply for scholarships and make sure you have financial aid to help you with some of that cost. Choose your meal plan carefully. Pick a meal plan that you're actually using. And if you find out that it's not the right one for you, ask questions. Can you change it? Is it too late? Can you change it for the following semester or at least the next year? Don't pay for something that you don't actually use. And then buy used or rent textbooks. And these are going to go quick. So if you wait until the day classes start to buy your textbooks, I guarantee all of the used ones are going to be gone and you're going to be stuck paying double the price because you have to buy a new textbook and that was all that's left. And let me give you a secret. Your college campus bookstore might not have the best deals. So look everywhere. There's so many different sites out there to buy textbooks. So utilize those sites, find the best deal. Don't just go again with the thing that's right, easiest for you right in front of you. Use your resources. The left-hand side are some of the resources I've talked about today that can be really helpful. The right-hand side are all of those free scholarship search sites I've mentioned. So these are not endorsed by FIA, but these can just be a good jumping off place where you can start your search process. I want to point out, I have parents and families who call me all the time and say, hey, Amy, like my student is interested in this major, or they have this hobby. Are there any scholarships out there for the student? I'm going to be honest. I can't keep track of all of the scholarships that are out there and I won't know. So what I would do is I'd send you this list and say, hey, these all have search bars. Go on them. Type in that major. Type in that hobby. Hit search. A list will come up of scholarships that you might be eligible for. Go ahead and start applying for them. Again, it's never too early to start looking. Social media, we're out there on social media. We do different programs on Fridays, talking about ways to save and different programs that we have. So you can always follow us online for more information. And then, like I said, my name's Amy Soddy. I'm the access partner for Allegheny County. So if you have comments, concerns, questions, you can always reach out to me at a different point or throw them in the chat. We'll take just a couple-minute break before I get started, and then we're going to talk about the FAFSA and do a walkthrough of the FAFSA application. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we can go through them now before the next part of the presentation. Okay, let's see. I don't see any questions yet, but feel free. We'll just take a minute or two break before we get started in the next portion. If you have already done your FAFSA, you feel like you don't need help, you don't have to stay on, but we are going to be going over a lot of the questions that I get most commonly when it comes to the FAFSA. So this can be really helpful for folks. All right, so it looks like we don't have any questions, so we're going to jump right into the FAFSA portion of the evening. So I'm going to hit share in a second, and you're going to see my FAFSA presentation. Whoops. Okay. All right. So again, we're going to be going right through the FAFSA today. So I didn't see anyone new joining us, but if you have joined us, my name is Amy Soddy. I'm the Access Partner for Allegheny County for FIA. At FIA, we provide Pennsylvania state grants and special programs to eligible students. I'll share my contact information again at the end. Should you have any comments, questions, concerns that you have, you can email me, call me, text me, whatever is easiest. I can help you through this process. So we're literally jumping right into the FAFSA. Again, if you have questions, throw them in the chat, but as I'm presenting, I can't see them, so I'll answer the questions at the end. So first things first, before you even start the FAFSA, there's some information that you need. The first, you need social security numbers for students and parents in the household. I can't tell you how many times I've done FAFSA workshops and folks come in and they realize that they don't know their social security number or they don't remember the students. You are going to need this for the student and for parents, so make sure you have this ready. Like I said earlier, this information is based on prior tax year information. So you're completing the 21-22 FAFSA, which uses 2019 tax information. So you're going to want to make sure that you have your 2019 tax returns, 2019 W-2s, if that applies. If you didn't have a W-2 or you didn't file, you don't need that information. You will need any and all 2019 untaxed income that you received and earned. So again, have records of that ready to go. And then it's going to ask for asset information. So asset information would be what you had in cash, in your checking and savings accounts, any investments that you have, such as real estate or 529 plans or savings accounts. One question I get all the time is, what about, those 401ks or retirement accounts? That's not included as an asset, so you wouldn't have to report 401ks in your assets. But anything else, stocks, bonds, etc., is going to have to be reported. Now, when you report asset information, it's as of the day you file the FAFSA. So it's basically a snapshot as of that day. So when you're pulling that information together, make sure it's current. We're not looking back at 2019. It's current asset information. And we'll talk about that. Now, you're also, before you even start the FAFSA, you're also going to have to create FSA ID accounts. Now, it gets a little confusing, but you need an account for the student. And parents, if you're listening, parents, you're going to have to create your own separate FSA ID accounts. So there's going to be two accounts. There's going to be one for the student and one for the parent. So you each will have separate usernames. You'll have separate passwords, right? You have to link them to two separate email addresses. You can't use the same one. You can link up a mobile phone number if you'd prefer, and you'll also answer security questions. So if you ever get locked out, you're going to answer the security questions to reset your password. So students, when you're creating your FSA ID account, all of this should be your information. So sometimes I have parents who like to do this for their student, and maybe they're answering the security questions for themselves while creating the student's account. And that can just cause a lot of confusion. So I do suggest to everyone, do this process together. Students, sit down with your parents, parents sit with your students, each create your own separate accounts together. Now, these accounts are what's used to electronically sign the FAFSA application and for a couple of other things that you may need throughout the year, such as applying for a federal Parent Plus loan or completing entrance counseling for your federal student loans. So you want to make sure that you write down this FSA ID username and password that you create somewhere where you're going to remember, somewhere that you have access to, so that way you can get into these accounts whenever you need. Now the student uses the FSA ID account to log on to the FAFSA application. Parents, you will use the FSA ID account at the end of the student's FAFSA. So you, the parent, are not creating and completing a FAFSA, but your FSA ID account that you create is used to sign your student's FAFSA at the end. And I know that always causes confusions. Again, I'll kind of walk you through the process, but I just want to clear that up. Students will have their own separate account from the parents. And I want to point out for my students, when it asks you to list a high school email address, do not use when it asks you to list an email address, do not use your high school email address. That happens all the time. But guess what? After you graduate from high school, a couple months later, your high school email address might be deactivated or terminated because you're no longer attending there. Well, you don't want to get locked out of this FSA ID account because your email address is invalid. So don't use your high school account. If you don't have a personal email account, now is the perfect time to create one. You can create a personal email account and use that for this FSA ID account. Okay, so student, you're going to create an FSA ID account. Parent, you're going to create an FSA ID account. Once those accounts are created, you do have to wait about a week. Okay, so your information, you will enter your social security number. So your social security number, your date of birth, and your name for each account are going to be sent to the Social Security Administration. Why? Because they want to double check that you are who you say you are. This is federal financial aid. It's a big deal. Like, you have to make sure that you're entering everything correctly. So they're going to double check that your name matches social security number and matches your date of birth on file. As long as everything goes through, maybe within about 4 days or so, you're going to get an email saying, yep, your account has been verified. You're good to go. And at that point, you can start the FAFSA. So you don't want to start the FAFSA process until your account has been verified. Now, sometimes I get this from parents is, well, I've created an account for my own student loans, or maybe for a different student who went to college. Do I create another one? No, you don't. In fact, it won't let you create another account. You as an individual can only have one FSA ID account. Now, you as the parent, you can use that FSA ID account to sign multiple students' FAFSAs, but you can't create multiple FSA ID accounts with the same social security number. It won't let that happen. So if you've already created an account in the past, you don't need to create another one. You'll use that same username and password to sign your student's FAFSA at the end. So when the student goes to FAFSA.gov, I want to point out the hyperlink will change. So recently they've combined all of the financial aid sites into one called studentaid.gov. When you go on to studentaid.gov, there's so many different things on that site that sometimes you're not understanding exactly where you need to go to find something. So I still suggest going to FAFSA.gov. The hyperlink will change, but it takes you right to the FAFSA. You don't have to figure out where on the website it's located. It'll take you right to the application. Now, when you go onto the application, it's going to ask you to log in, and it's going to say, are you the student or are you the parent? Parents, I'm going to tell you, don't log in as yourself, right? Because it's just going to get so confusing and it's going to cause you so many more questions. So everyone listening, you will click on I am the student. Okay, so you're going to click on I'm the student, and then the student is going to have to log in. So it's going to ask the student to enter the FSA ID account username and password that they've created. So you'll type your username, you'll type the password as a student, you'll hit enter, It's going to show you this disclaimer. You have to accept it to continue, so hit accept. And then it's going to take you to the Get Started page. At the top, it's going to say welcome, comma, your first name. So you're going to know that you're in the correct account. If you see the parent's name, then you sign in as the parent, and that happens all the time. So again, make sure you're logging in with the student's account, double check that it has the student's name, and then it's going to give you an option. Which FAFSA are you going to be starting? Now, you'll notice that the FAFSA for this current year is out there because some students are still doing that right now. You don't want that one. You want the one for next year. So you want to start the 2021, or excuse me, the 21-22 FAFSA. So I have the arrow pointing to the right that you want to select. So make sure again that you're selecting the 21-22 FAFSA because you're looking to attend college during the fall of 2021, spring of 2022. Okay, so you're going to start the 21-22 FAFSA, hit next. It's going to ask you to create a save key. Okay, save key, super basic, easy, 4 or 5 digits, something that you're going to remember. Doesn't have to be anything difficult or any long passwords. But what this save key does is it helps you so that if you get maybe halfway through the FAFSA and you realize that you don't have enough time to finish it or you don't have all the information you need, you can hit save, you can X out of the FAFSA, and you can go back into it at any time. However, to go back into it, you have to remember that save key. So write it down somewhere where you're going to remember, but then once you actually submit your FAFSA, you don't need the save key anymore. So it's just temporary until your FAFSA is submitted. So after you get that FAFSA submitted, you can cross off the save key if you wrote it down. If you're like me, you put it in your notes on your phone, you can just delete it. You won't need it after that point. Now, after you hit next, you're going to jump right into the FAFSA. Now you're going to notice at the top where I have that arrow, there's a navigation bar that shows you all of the different sections you're about to walk through. Now the one thing with FAFSA is you can't skip through to the next section until you finish the one that you're at. So I know sometimes my parents or students want to look ahead, want to see what questions are going to be asked. You really can't skip through. You have to fill out every page to hit next and to continue on. Now I have screenshots and you're going to see all of the screenshots as we walk through. So, don't feel like if you have questions, you can always go back onto this presentation, double check, make sure, look at what the screenshot looks like if you want to see ahead about what you're going to be answering. But we'll be walking through that all tonight, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Now on this first section, you'll also notice that there's a little blue banner towards like the middle of the screen, and it says student information. That blue banner is on every single screen that we're about to see. And it's either going to say student information or parent information. Double check that blue banner on every screen and just make sure that you're answering it for the right person. Because sometimes parents, you see a question and you're like, oh, that doesn't apply to my student. It must be asking it about me, the parent. Well, no, double check, make sure, oh, it says student information. So again, just make sure you're answering the questions about who it's pertaining to. Now also, I have it circled on the right-hand side. There's little question marks for every single question. So if you get to a question and you're not sure what it's asking you or you don't know what it means, click on that question mark. A box will come up with a bunch more information. Sometimes there's pictures showing you where to find that information, where to look, how to know what this is asking you about, but there's always tons more information if you have questions. So utilize those little question marks along the way if needed. But the first section is student demographics. This section is pretty easy. Student's name, middle initial, last name, date of birth. You enter that, hit next. Then it's asking for student email and phone number. Again, don't use your high school email address. Use a personal email account. Make sure it's one that you're checking. You can enter a telephone number if you have one. Hit next, it's student address. So this is the permanent mailing address for the student. So you're going to want to enter your mailing address. Hit next. Then it takes you to the student residency and eligibility. There's only 2 questions. It's going to ask, have you lived in Pennsylvania for at least 5 years? And then, are you a U.S. citizen? If you enter yes to that you've lived in PA for at least 5 years, when you hit next, it actually shows you the same screen again, but it has this little box that comes up. Don't worry. It's not that you did anything wrong. That's not why it's showing you this box. All it's telling you is that you can complete a state grant application, which we'll talk about, at the end of the FAFSA. Basically, it's just a reminder that that link is at the end of the FAFSA for you to complete. So all you would have to do is just hit next again to continue on. Sometimes I'm working with families and that pops up and they get all panicky. Again, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just a reminder that the link at the end is there for you. And when you hit next, it takes you to the student education section. So first it says, what will your high school completion status be when you begin college? So this is for the 21-22 year. So, in fall of 2021, what's your high school completion status? Well, all of you would have received your high school, degree, so you can put high school diploma. Then it's going to ask what college degree or certificate will you be working on for the 21-22 year. So you may be working on an associate's degree, you may be working on a certificate program, or if you're going for a 4-year degree, that would be your first bachelor's degree, right? Because you don't already have a bachelor's 4 years degree. So you would put first bachelor's degree. Then it's going to ask you, which kind of is the same question, but it's saying, will you have your first bachelor's degree before you begin the 21-22 school year? So this is asking you, have you already received a 4-year bachelor's degree? You're all in high school, right? You haven't received a bachelor's degree already. So everyone will be entering no for that. Then it's what will your college grade level be when you begin the 21-22 school year? Most of you at that point will have never attended college for a full semester, so you can put never attended. The last question, are you interested in being considered for work study? This is for the federal work study program. Even if you're not sure if you want to participate in work study or not, I always suggest hitting yes. You can decide at a different point if you actually want to apply if you're eligible. So I do suggest saying yes to that question. But if you say no, it doesn't mean that you won't be considered for it. You can always reach out to financial aid for more information. And then when you hit next, it's going to ask you some more information about the student. Now, I want to point out that FAFSA has something called skip logic. So depending on how you answer certain questions, you may or may not see all of the questions that I'm showing on my screens. And this is the perfect example. It's going to ask you, are you male or female? If you enter that you're female, you will not see the next 2 questions. You will just be able to hit next and keep going. If you enter male, you will see the next question that says, are you registered with Selective Service? Now, maybe you haven't heard of Selective Service until now, but if you're a male student between the ages of 18 and 25, you have to register for Selective Service in order to be considered for federal financial aid and state financial aid. So everyone's going to have to say yes they're going to have to register for Selective Service if they're a male. Now, if you haven't already registered, that's okay. You can put no. If you put no, a box will come up that says, do you want us to register you with Selective Service? So that would mean that FAFSA is going to take your information, send it to Selective Service, which is sss.gov, and they're going to register you right through the FAFSA. If you want, you can say yes. I do suggest saying yes just because it's going to save you a step down the line. You won't have to go to sss.gov yourself and register online. But again, it's up to you. If you say no, then the financial aid offices will reach out to you saying, hey, we've noticed you're not registered. Make sure you do that. You can't receive any financial aid until you have. Now, again, with the skip logic, if you are already registered with Selective Service, if you say yes, they won't even ask you the next question, and you'll just be able to hit next and continue on. It's then going to ask you for your driver's license. This is 100% optional. So students, if you have one, you can enter it. If you don't want to enter it, you don't have to. You can leave it blank and hit next. It's going to then, on the next screen, ask if you are a foster youth or if you were at any time in the foster care system, yes or no. So answer that and then move on to the next 2 questions. This is asking you about the highest school completed by parent 1 and parent 2. I want to point out with these questions and these questions only. These are specifically about your biological parents. So what is the highest school completed by your biological parents, parent 1, parent 2? There's tons of different options you can select from, high school, college, or beyond, you don't know, etc. So select it to the best of your ability. But even if later on the FAFSA we get to parent section and I tell you that you aren't going to be listing your biological parents or maybe one biological parent, this is specifically about both biological parents. So you'd enter that based on that and hit next. Now we're in the next section. Okay, so this is the school selection. So first you have to enter the high school that you attend. So you'll put the name of the high school, the city, the state that it's located in, hit search. A box will come up with the high schools that match that criteria, right? It's only going to be that one. Select that school, hit next. And now you have to do the same thing, but with colleges. So you have to list all of the colleges and institutions that you may be interested in attending in the fall of next year. Now, you don't have to have already applied. You don't have to have already been admitted to list colleges. So this could be any college that you could possibly consider attending, right? So I'm going to suggest to all of you, don't just list one. Okay, even if you know and you think this is the one school I'm attending no matter what, list a couple, okay? Because this is going to allow you to get financial aid notifications from different schools. Schools can't do anything without being listed on your FAFSA. So even if you're not sure today, still list a couple of schools, just humor me, okay? You can only list up to 10 colleges. So even if there's maybe there's 12 colleges that you're interested in, you can only have 10 listed on your FAFSA at one time. So you would want to list the top 10 that you're interested in. You'd want to fill out the rest of the FAFSA. You'd hit submit. About a week or two later, the financial aid offices that you've listed will receive that information. At that point, you can go back onto the FAFSA. You can select make a correction, and you can edit the school list. So at that point, say there's 12 that you're interested in. After you've submitted it, the schools receive the information. About a week later, you go onto the FAFSA. You would have to delete 2 schools, and then you can add the next 2, the last 2 that you hadn't listed. Once you've added those last 2, go to the end, hit submit, and then those 2 will then receive all of your information. So that's all you'd have to do if you are interested in more than 10. You would just kind of have to submit it twice with a little bit of time in between so that your information can be sent to all of the schools. Now, once you've made your final decision, so that might be in the springtime or the summer, but once you know officially where you want to attend, you'll want to make sure that you notify us at FIA. You can go right online to FIA.org and update your school with us so that we send your state grant information to the correct school. Okay, so you'll just want to contact us once you've made that final decision. Now again, just like the high school, you'll put in the name of the college, the city, the state, you'll hit search, list will come up, you'll select the correct one. After you've listed all of the colleges, it's going to ask you for the housing plans. So for that specific college, do you plan on living on campus, off campus, or with a parent? You get to select which one. So maybe depending on what the college is, maybe one of the colleges you would live on campus and a different one you would be commuting. That's okay. You can have different selections for each college. Now, again, this is something you can change in the future. So if you selected on campus and you've later decided you want to commute, you can go back onto the FAFSA, select make a correction, go to this section, and you can update the housing status at any time. So once you made that final decision, if it's changed, just make sure you go back onto the FAFSA and update that question. Now, we're already through 2 sections. We're moving on to section 3. This is the dependency status section. So this section specifically is trying to understand, based on FAFSA's definition, are you a dependent or an independent student? Now, FAFSA has a different definition than maybe you have, okay? So in FAFSA's eyes, in order to be an independent student, you have to enter yes to the following questions, basically. The first question is a little tricky because it's not yes or no, but it says, what is your marital status as of today? So student, again, this is about the student. Are you single? Are you married or remarried? Are you separated? Are you divorced or widowed? Most of my students, you're single, so you'll put single and hit next. If you're married or remarried, that's one of the things that makes you automatically independent in FAFSA's eyes. But if you list single, separated, divorced, widowed, you are not independent. You would continue on to the next questions. It will then ask about dependents. So do you now or will you have children who receive more than half of their support from you for the school year, the 21-22 year? So do you have children? The second question is, do you have any dependents? Again, who live with you and receive more than half of their support from you? Again, most of the time, this is no. You're answering no to both of these and moving on. If you answer no, again, you're still a dependent student. You move on to the next questions. Then it asks you a couple of questions all on this one screen, and it's saying check any and all that apply. So are you currently serving on active duty? Are you a veteran of U.S. Armed Forces? At any time since you turned 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care? Were you a dependent, ward of the court, etc.? If all of these are no, then you would select none of the above. Again, you're dependent, you're moving on to the next one. If maybe a couple of them apply, you can select all that do apply. You would be considered an independent student and you would skip forward. The last question in this section is asking on or after July 1, were you homeless or were you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? Maybe you're not sure what that means or what FAFSA's definition of homeless is. You can always click on that question mark for more information. But again, if you're answering no to this, then you are a dependent student. Okay, so if you answered you're single, you don't have children, you don't have dependents, you're not a veteran, you're not serving active duty, you're not an orphan or ward of the court, you're not homeless or at risk of being homeless, when you hit next, it's going to tell you that you are a dependent student in FAFSA's eyes. If you're answering yes to any of those, or maybe you're married or you have children that receive half of your support, you will skip the parent section. It will take you to the end and you can sign and submit without a parent signature. But I want to make a note, financial aid offices will reach out. They do have to verify that you are truly an independent student. So maybe they would ask for a marriage license or proof that you provide, over 50% of the support for a dependent, or paperwork that shows that you have a legal guardian, court paperwork, whatever it may be. So if you are answering yes to any of those, don't send any official copies to the colleges that you're interested in. Make sure that they're all, copies that can get, destroyed if needed, because you're gonna have to send these to multiple colleges. All of them will have to verify that you are an independent student. Now, again, 90% of the time, you're single, you don't have children, you don't have dependents, you're none of the above, you're not at risk of being homeless. So then it takes you to this section and it says, you have to provide parent information. So you will select, I will provide parent information and hit next. If you keep reading, it explains that if there's a special circumstance and you're unable to provide parent information, it explains this is very limited circumstances, but if that's the case, then you can select that you're unable to provide parent information. When you hit next, you'll skip the parent section, you'll enter just your information and sign it. If you say that you're not able to provide parent information, your FAFSA will be rejected. What happens when it's rejected? Financial aid offices can't do anything with it. So it just kind of sits out there as pending. That's because financial aid offices are going to have to reach out and they're going to have to ask you questions about why you can't provide parent information. They're going to need to know, all types of things. They're going to ask a bunch of things like, do you live with your parents? What's going on? Why can't you enter their information? This is very limited that you can't. Okay, so, maybe parents and student, you're in a disagreement. That's not a special circumstance. You have to still provide parent information. Maybe your parents don't plan on providing any support for you for college. That's not a limited circumstance. You're still going to have to enter their information. Just because their information's on the FAFSA doesn't mean they have to provide any support for you, but you can't complete the FAFSA without their information, without their electronic signature. So again, 90% of the time, you're answering that you will provide parent information. It's taking you to the parent section. But how do you know which parent or parents need to be listed on the FAFSA? Sometimes that's hard to know, okay? So how do you know? So quickly, we're going to go through a little chart. So if your parents are married and they live together, they would both be listed on the FAFSA. If you have two biological parents that live together, but they're not married, they would still both be listed on the FAFSA. If you have adoptive parents, so if you've legally been adopted, those parents would be listed on the FAFSA. Okay. In the case that you have a two-parent household, only one parent creates an FSA ID account, and that is the parent that will sign your FAFSA at the end. In a two-parent household, it doesn't matter which parent does that, either one. Okay. Now, if you have divorced or separated parents, okay, then the parent that you are going to list on the FAFSA, that's called your custodial parent. The custodial parent in FAFSA, they want you to use the parent that you, the student, lived with the most over the past 12 months. So literally the day you're sitting down to do the FAFSA, who did you live with the most over the past 12 months? Whichever parent that is your custodial parent, is the parent that has to be listed on the FAFSA. That's it. End of it. Now, sometimes I do have parents who call me and they say, our custody arrangement, we split it 50-50, we rotate weeks, whatever it might be. It's a 50-50 even split. In that case, that custody is split 50-50 and it's an even split. In that case only, FAFSA would say then you have to use the parent that provided the most support for you over the past 12 months. So whoever provided over 50% of your support, and that's financial support. So if you called me to talk through it with me, I'd say, okay, well, who provides health insurance? Who pays medical bills? Who pays the cell phone bill if there is one? Who buys the food, the school supplies, clothing, etc. Whichever parent provides over 50% of the financial support is the parent that's going to be used on the FAFSA. That's the custodial parent. Now, if that custodial parent is remarried to somebody else, then you would have to use that spouse's information, demographic information, financial information, asset information, etc. on the FAFSA. So it doesn't matter if you weren't married in 2019, right, when it's asking about finances. If you're married as of the day you file the FAFSA, then the custodial parent and the spouse, so your step parent, would both be listed on the FAFSA. So both of their information. Okay. Who's not listed on the FAFSA? Foster parents or legal guardians, they do not get listed as parents on the FAFSA. And anyone else the student's living with. Maybe you live with a grandparent or an aunt, an uncle, a family friend. They do not get listed as your parent on the FAFSA. Okay, so now that we know who is and who isn't listed, it'll take you to the parent section. It's going to first ask you, as of today, what's the marital status of your parents? Notice the first option is married/remarried. So sometimes I have folks see this and they're like, oh, well, I'm not married to their biological parent, so the other biological parent, so I'm going to put divorced or separated. And then we find out, later that you're remarried. Okay, it's divorced/remarried. Or excuse me, married/remarried. The second option is divorced/separated. So again, sometimes I have parents who call me and they're like, oh, we're not divorced, but we're separated. We live in separate households. What do I select? Okay, then you'd select divorced/separated. That's one option. Then there's never married, there's widowed, and then there's an option that says unmarried, but both legal parents live together. So select whichever one applies. If you're married/remarried, it will ask you when your parents got married/remarried. You'll have to enter the month and year. For some of you, maybe that was a really long time ago. Pull out your documents, pull out your pictures. You're going to want to make sure, again, that you put the correct month and year that you were married or remarried. Then it'll take you through the parent demographic section. You're first going to have to pick and enter information for your first parent. Now, in parentheses, it says father, mother, step-parent. It can be any. It's not in that particular order. So if you're in a one-parent household, you will only list your first parent, your parent first. That's it. You won't have a second section. If you have a two-parent household, again, either parent can be listed first. It doesn't matter. You're just going to have to remember which one you listed first. So which one you list as parent one. You'll enter their social, their name, their date of birth, and email address. If you're in a two-parent household, again, when you hit next, it's going to say enter the information for your other parent. This is parent 2, social security number, name, date of birth. Hit next. It asks you quickly, have your parents lived in PA for at least 5 years? Yes or no? Answer that. Move on. Okay, now it takes you to the parent household information. So again, that blue banner at the top says parent information. So this is about parents' household. Now, based on the previous questions, whether you entered one or two parents, the first question says your parents. That number is automatically calculated. So in this sample, the person listed 2 parents. So that says 2. If you live in a one-parent household, it's automatically going to say 1 for you. It doesn't give you the option to change that. The next question says yourself, even if you don't live with your parents. Again, that's automatically 1, and that's going to be 1 for everybody because you yourself as the student are included in the household, even if you don't live with your parents. So at that point, those 2 are automatically answered for you. The next 2 are not. So the first one is your parents' other children. So even if they don't live with your parents, they can be listed on the FAFSA if your parents provide over half of their support. So, if you have siblings in the household or siblings that don't live in the household, but your parents provide over 50% of their support, they would be listed there. Say that answer, maybe you have 2 siblings that your parents provide over half their support. When you enter 2 there, the number towards the bottom will automatically be updated. So in this situation, if you entered 2, it would go from 3 to 5. So it automatically calculates it up for you. Now again, parents, you have to provide over 50% of that person's support. So sometimes, again, I worked in financial aid. The parent would call me and say, well, oh, do I list my child? They're 25, they live on their own, but it says I can list them. Well, do you provide over half of their support? And the parent would be like, oh, well, they work a full-time job, like they have a salary or whatever. Well, then no, you're not providing over half of their support. You wouldn't list them, right? And maybe the case where they're going to school or something and you pay their rent and their utilities and their bills, then yeah, you provide over half their support. They can be listed in that case. The next section says other people, if they now live with your parents, and again, your parents provide over half of their support. Maybe your grandparents or something live with you, and parents, again, do you provide over half of their support? If they have a pension or Social Security benefits, you may not be providing half of their support just because they live with you. So you, again, have to calculate to see, do you really provide over half of their support? If so, you can list them in the household. So that's the household size. Again, that last number is automatically updated for you. The second section on this page says number in college. So how many in the household are attending college? Now this is just for you, the student. Automatically it's 1. And then any other student, so any other children. So even if your parent is in school or going back to school, they do not get included in this number. It would just be other children that are going to school. You do have to attend at least half time. That's typically 6 credits each semester. Again, you would total up that number, enter it, hit next. Now we're going on to the next section. Okay, so this section is parent financials. You'll notice the second section after this is student financials. The questions that we're going through for the parent are the same identical questions that we would be answering for the student. So students, after we go through parent section, you would be answering the exact same questions. Again, there's skip logic built into it. So depending on how you answer some of these questions, you may not see all of the options your parents are seeing, but it's still the same questions throughout. So we're only going to go through the parent section. We're going to skip over the student financial section again because it's identical. Okay, so parent section, first question for 2019, have your parents completed their IRS income tax return? Again, this is based on 2019. Almost all of us have already completed it, so you would select already completed. Students, maybe you don't plan on completing your taxes for 2019, you didn't file, then you can put that you will not be filing, right? And that would skip through the next couple of questions for you. Then it asks what type of income tax return did your parents file? Again, most of us file a 1040, so you would select IRS 1040. And then what's your parents' tax filing status according to their tax return? So did they file married filing joint or married filing separate or single, had a household? Select the one that applies. Depending on how you answer that, you may be given the option to use the data retrieval tool. Not everyone will have this option. So for example, say that your parents are divorced or separated. Mom, you live with mom the most over the past 12 months, so mom's your custodial parent. Maybe mom was divorced or separated in 2019, so she filed her taxes as head of household. But now it's 2020, mom's remarried. And so because she's listing remarried as her marital status, but her tax filing status is head of household, that conflicts on FAFSA's eyes, so they won't give you the option of using the data retrieval tool. In that case, mom and mom's spouse would have to go through and manually add up their adjusted gross income, their taxes paid, etc., as we go through the next couple of questions. So they won't have the option of using the data retrieval tool. If you don't have the option, it's okay. Like I said, you're just going to have to manually enter that information. If you have questions while you're doing that, you can call me. You can email me. I can help you through that process if you need. If you do have the option to use the data retrieval tool, though, I 100% suggest using it. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. A lot of the questions we're about to go through will be automatically answered for you. The information pulls directly from the IRS right onto your FAFSA. So if you select yes, you want to use the data retrieval tool, at that point, If you're using it for the parent, it will ask the parent with the FSA ID account to log in with their FSA ID account. So you have to put the username and password you created. The reason is because it's double checking your name, your date of birth, your social security number with the IRS records. So it's double checking, again, verifying that you are who you say you are. As long as that verification processes, it takes you to the IRS website. Another security protocol is they're going to ask you to enter your address as it was on your 2019 tax return. So the address exactly as it was. So even if you've moved since then, you still enter the address on your 2019 tax return. Again, as long as that address matches the IRS address that they have on your tax return, you will be able to use the data retrieval tool. You can select transfer tax information. All of your tax information will come from the IRS right onto your FAFSA, and it's going to skip some of the questions that we're about to see. So the first question, it says, what's your parents' adjusted gross income for 2019? Now, if you keep reading, it tells you exactly where to find this on your 1040. If you're still not sure, you click on that question mark, a box will come up. It actually has a picture of what that line looks like on your 1040, so it can help you through this process. Now, if you use the data retrieval tool, you won't have to worry about finding this information. It will literally, this bar won't even be there. It will just say transferred from the IRS. So it doesn't tell you the value. It won't tell you what it said on your tax return because it's a privacy thing, but it will just say that it's been transferred from the IRS. You know that that information is good to go. You can just hit next. Now this next section, no matter if you use the data retrieval tool or not, is going to be there, and you have to enter this. So it's going to ask you, how much did your parent 1 earn from working in 2019? How much did parent 2 earn from working in 2019? This is why you have to remember, if you're in a 2-parent household, which parent you listed first, because you have to split up the income. This tells you what to check. Check your W-2 forms, check your IRS line 1, schedule 1, line 3, etc. Figure out how much that was and enter it for each parent. You'll enter those values and hit next. This next question is parents' income tax for 2019. Again, if you use the data retrieval tool, it will say transferred from the IRS. You won't have to follow the instructions and pull that off of your IRS 1040 and Schedule 2. Now, all of a sudden, it goes from asking 1 or 2 questions to a whole bunch on one screen. This always causes everyone to just freak out. They're like, whoa, 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 what's going on? Why is it asking so many questions? But the reason is because most of these questions honestly are going to be 0 for most of you, okay? So the first one, combat pay or special combat pay. If that doesn't apply, put 0, keep moving on. Student college grant and scholarship aid reported to the IRS. This would be something that would be on a 1040, right? Because you actually report this to the IRS. Parents, most of you are not receiving college grants and scholarships. That would be 0. Even for my students, after you've already been at college and you're doing the FAFSA year after year, almost all of the college scholarships and grants that you receive are not taxable. They're not reported to the IRS. So almost always this is going to be 0, even for you as the student, okay? So unless it's reported to the IRS, unless it's taxable, 0, okay? Education credits, untaxed portions of IRA distributions, IRA deductions and payments, tax-exempt interest, etc. Those 4, if they apply, it tells you exactly where to look on your 1040. Again, if you use the data retrieval tool, those 4 questions are automatically answered. You can skip right through. The next section, child support your parents paid, earnings from work under a cooperative education program, and then lastly, taxable earnings from need-based employment programs such as federal work study. So this, again, for parents, these might all be 0. Maybe you have child support that you paid, you can enter that. If not, again, 0. I want to point out with the need-based employment, this is the one of the perks of doing federal work study and the state work study program. The money that you earn in those programs does not get held against you later when you're filing the FAFSA as a returning student. That amount that you've earned in work study actually comes out of the equation that determines your EFC. So this amount that you earn in work study will not be held against you. It won't impact how much financial aid you receive. So that's just one of the perks of doing federal work study. The next section, child support received for all children, any housing, food, or other living allowances. That's usually for our military or clergy families. Payments to tax-deferred pensions and retirement savings plans. This is specifically found on your W-2 form. This is, again, why you need your W-2s, because 1, you have to split out the income, and 2, you need to look at this tax-deferred pensions. A lot of times you're used to putting zeros for the past couple of questions, so people skip right over this. But this may apply to you, so double check your W-2 to see if there's any amount value that you have to report. Veterans, non-education benefits, etc. Again, that can be, maybe that doesn't apply, that's 0. And then lastly, other untaxed income not reported. This would be such as workers' comp or disability benefits. I want to point out for untaxed income, Social Security benefits and supplemental security income are not included on the FAFSA. So for parents and for students, if you receive Social Security or supplemental security income, you do not report that on the FAFSA. The last question in the financial section is for the parents' assets. You may have the option to skip asset information depending on how you answered previous questions. So you may be able to skip it, you may not. I think most parents can't skip it, so most will have to say yes and enter the next 3 questions. The first is, as of today, what's your parents' total current balance of cash and then savings and checking accounts? Again, as of today, the day you're filing the FAFSA, what does that look like? Question 2, as of today, what's the net worth of your parents' investments? So if you have any 529 plans or savings accounts or stocks and bonds, these might be reported here. So 529 plans would be reported in the investments. If you have a 529 and it's in your name and the student's name, you would report it under the parent. And you would have to report the total amount. So if you have multiple 529s, maybe you have multiple children, it would be the total, and all of those accounts would be reported as a parent's asset. Now, it does help that it's a parent's asset. It actually counts less than if it was the student's asset. So it does work out a little bit better that way. Then as of today, what's the net worth of your parents' current businesses or investment farms? You would not include a family farm or a family business with 100 or fewer employees. And it tells you that right there. So again, these questions are all as of today. You would hit next. It will take you to the student financial section. Like I said, exact same questions it's asking the student that we just went through with the parent. The only difference is all of my students, you're going to have to enter asset information. You don't have the option, no matter what, to skip over this. So you will have to enter assets again. For you, the student, what's the total that you have in cash, savings, checking accounts? If you have any investments, you can enter them, etc. If not, put 0. Don't just leave them blank, and then hit next. We're going into almost the last section, okay? So it's asking you this question, are you a preparer? Now, it even tells you in parentheses that this is rare. A preparer would be someone who you actually pay to complete the FAFSA for you. The FAFSA, like I said, is 100% free to complete. You should not pay anybody to do this for you. You can call me and I can help you through this process. Don't pay someone to do this for you. So everyone should be putting no, you are not a preparer, and hitting next. It will take you to the signature page. It tells you a student signature is needed, a parent signature is needed. So first you can sign as the student. So you would click provide student signature. Student, you have to agree to the terms. Now, because the student logged into the FAFSA, right? They're the ones who clicked login. They've already entered their FSA ID, username, and password. They're literally going to be able to hit sign this FAFSA. It's as easy as that. It takes you right back to this page. It says signed electronically. There's a green little check. You know you did it right. Then you can do provide parent signature. Again, if you're in a 2-parent household, only one parent has to sign. So you would select, are you parent 1 or parent 2? Click sign as that parent. You, the parent, have to agree to the terms. Now, if you as the parent have already logged in to use the data retrieval tool, you've already entered your username, your password for your FSA ID account, you won't even have to enter it again. Just like the student, you're going to hit sign. It's going to take you right back to that page. If you haven't already used that, maybe you couldn't use the data retrieval tool, then you're going to enter your username and password here. Okay, so you'll put your username, your password in, you'll hit sign this FAFSA. If for some reason that this does not work and it's, giving you a headache and you really truly can't sign electronically, you do have one other option. Now, this is like a last resort, so only if you can't sign it electronically. You can select at the bottom. It says other options to sign and submit. It brings you to this page. Option 1 says sign electronically with your FSA ID. Well, you would have done that on the previous page if you could have. So option 1, get rid of that one. It doesn't even help you. The third option says submit without signatures. Well, if you submit it without signatures, like I said, your FAFSA gets rejected and no financial aid can process without the signature. So option 3, we don't care about. The only option on here that would help you is print a signature page, option 2. So if you truly cannot sign electronically, you can select print a signature page, print out a page, sign it by hand, you mail it into the FAFSA. Within about a week or two, FAFSA will receive it, they'll update it, it's pretty quick and easy, and then your FAFSA will be marked as official. Okay, now most of us, 99% of us, should be able to sign electronically. So you would enter your username, password, you'd hit sign. It will take you back to this page. At this point, you see 2 green checks. You know it's been signed by the student. It's been signed by the parent. You can then hit submit. So don't submit the FAFSA until it's been signed by both the student and parent. But once it's been signed, you can hit submit my FAFSA. It brings you to the confirmation page. I want to point out 2 things on the confirmation page. First, there is a link at the bottom that says start your state application. So this would link you to the Pennsylvania State Grant application through FIA. You can complete that. It takes maybe 5-10 minutes. Because we use all of the information on the FAFSA, our application is very short, quick, and easy to do. If you don't see that link or it doesn't work for you and it says, it's not opening up or anything, that's okay. Don't panic. Within about a week, you're going to get an email from us at FIA saying, hey, you submitted your FAFSA, you need to do the state grant application. You only complete the state grant application once, so your first year. So this year you'd complete it. You won't ever have to complete it again. After that, you just need to do your FAFSA every year. But again, you're going to get an email from FIA if you forget to click on that link. You can't do the state grant application right away if you did not use that link. So you do have to wait until your FAFSA is processed. Again, it takes about 3 or 4 days for it to process. And then you can go right to FIA.org, create an account, and start the state grant application. Again, it's really quick and easy to do. The second thing on this page I want to point out is that it gives you your estimated expected family contribution. Pay attention to that. That's going to give you an idea of what that EFC is. Again, you can use that EFC, go onto the college website, figure out what their cost of attendance is, take cost of attendance minus EFC, and start figuring out, are you going to be eligible for need-based aid, such as maybe work study or federal subsidized loans? And also, if your EFC is under that $5,700 amount, you may qualify for a federal Pell Grant. So you can just kind of keep that in the back of your mind until you need that information later. This is what the state grant application looks like if you use that link. It tells you what you need to get started. Same thing basically as the FAFSA, and then you'd hit continue. Again, that portion is really easy to complete. But if you have any questions or concerns throughout this process, again, here's my contact information. I know I went through all of this information very quick. So again, save my contact information as needed. I'm here to help. So I can definitely help you if you need. So I do appreciate, honestly, everyone taking their time and listening today. I know that I went over everything and it's a lot of information and it can be really overwhelming. So if you do have questions, throw them in the chat. I can hang around for a couple of minutes and answer any questions that you have.